Anniversaries weren't really our thing. Not in the flashy Instagram couple kind of way. No matching outfits. No elaborate surprise weekends in Napa or posts gushing about for years with my best friend. We were more of a quiet diner dinner and folded card on the nightstand kind of pair. I liked it that way. Or at least, I used to. That morning, I had woken up early to grab flowers from a local shop in Mount Pleasant. Not the overpriced ones wrapped in foil that wilt before nightfall, real stems with garden dirt still clinging to them. Daisies, mostly. Some roses too, not because she loved them, but because they reminded me of our first real argument, something about me showing up late with a half-dead bouquet and a dumb excuse about traffic. That memory made me smile on the drive home. I also printed out a photo. One of my favorites. It was from our trip to Asheville in 2019, early in our relationship before life got complicated with work stress, family drama, and the kind of miscommunications that stack up like clutter you're too tired to deal with. In the photo, we were standing in front of a graffiti wall. Her hair was windblown and tangled, her cheeks flushed from hiking. My arm was around her waist. We both looked messy. And happy. I had it printed on glossy paper and framed it in a cheap wood frame from the CVS around the corner. It felt right. Small, thoughtful, unpretentious. I thought the evening would be simple. Maybe we'd drink some wine, joke about how fast 4 years had gone, and talk about planning that Maine trip we kept postponing. I didn't expect anything big. I just wanted it to feel like us again. When I pulled into the driveway around 4:30, I noticed Brooke's car was already parked out front. That was odd, but not completely out of place. She and Allison were close, too close sometimes. Brooke was the kind of person who never met a boundary she couldn't step over. I figured she had just stopped by to help Allison pick an outfit or give unsolicited relationship advice, like she usually did. I walked in with the flowers in one hand and the frame in the other. The front door creaked a little, one of those house quirks you grow used to but never fix. From the living room, I heard laughter, but it stopped the moment the door clicked shut behind me. They were sitting side by side on the couch. Brooke had her legs folded under her, a glass of white wine balanced on the armrest. Allison was leaning forward slightly, her hands on her knees. Brooke's laptop was open in front of them, angled toward Allison. They both looked up at me like I'd caught them mid-conversation. Or maybe mid-something else. "Hey," Allison said, standing up so quickly she bumped the coffee table. "You're early." She smiled, but it was too tight. "Too prepared?" "Yeah," I said, holding up the flowers like a peace offering. "Wanted to surprise you." Her eyes flicked to the bouquet, then to the framed photo in my other hand. Then back to Brooke, who was closing the laptop now subtly but not subtle enough. The screen dimmed just long enough for me to register what I saw, a beach, palm trees, and Allison in the middle of it all. Her hair was wet, her skin sun-kissed. She had on that green sundress she said she lost 2 summers ago. And there was a man tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a white shirt and sunglasses. Bearded. His arm was wrapped around her waist like it belonged there. She was smiling in the picture. But it wasn't the kind of smile she gave me when we were being playful or sarcastic. It was the soft, private kind, the one I hadn't seen in a while. "Old photos," Allison said quickly as she shut the laptop and stepped closer. "From last year." Brooke was going through her camera roll and we just got distracted. Brooke said nothing. There was a weird pause. Not long enough to call out, but just long enough to feel unnatural. Brooke avoided my eyes entirely, sipping from her glass and tucking a strand of hair behind her ear like she needed to be busy with something. "Oh," I said, trying to sound casual. "I don't remember us going to a beach last year." Allison let out a laugh, sharp and almost theatrical. "No, not us. That was just me and Brooke. Remember when I visited her in Jacksonville?" I didn't remember a beach trip being part of that story. She had said it was a weekend to reconnect and unplug. She had come back tired and distracted, saying she'd barely taken any pictures. Claimed they stayed in the Airbnb most of the time because it rained. Now, apparently, there were sunny beaches and close embraces with tall strangers. Still, I nodded, forcing a smile that didn't reach my eyes. "Right? Jacksonville." She walked over, took the flowers, and kissed me on the cheek. "These are beautiful," she said. Her voice was smooth, too smooth. "I feel bad I didn't get you anything." Brooke stood up. "I should get going," she muttered, gathering her things with the kind of urgency you only see when someone's desperate to escape tension they helped create. Allison gave her a look, brief, unreadable. Then she turned back to me and said, "You hungry?" We went through the motions. Dinner at the small bistro we both used to love. We got the same booth near the back window. Allison ordered the pasta she always got. We toasted with red wine. We laughed. Talked about random things. Made comments about the couple at the next table who were clearly on a first date. But there was a stiffness underneath it all. I kept replaying that photo in my mind, the way she leaned into him, the way his hand rested on her hip, how familiar it looked. And the way she shut the laptop like it was a reflex. I didn't bring it up. Not then. But I stopped listening closely. I started watching instead. The rest of the night moved like a movie I was acting in but not really present for. I noticed small things, how she kept her phone screen face down on the table even though it never buzzed. How she smiled too brightly when the waiter asked about dessert. How in the car, she stared out the window instead of singing along to the playlist we always put on during drives. I didn't sleep much that night. I kept thinking about that dress, the green one she told me she lost. About how she smelled like someone else's cologne the past few times she came home late. About how her phone had started staying on silent. How she left the room to text lately. How she was suddenly working late, a lot. One beach photo shouldn't mean anything. But the way she looked in it, the way she looked at that man like she used to look at me. That meant everything. And for the first time in our marriage, I realized something I never wanted to believe. It was possible I didn't know the whole story. They say your brain filters things out to protect you. That when you're in something deep in it, you miss the obvious. Maybe that's true. Maybe I didn't want to see it until I had to. But after that anniversary night, it was like someone adjusted the lens. Suddenly, everything that used to feel normal started looking off. It started small. Allison's late nights were nothing new. She worked in nonprofit development and said her office often hosted evening fundraisers and dinners. That had always made sense to me. She cared about her job. It wasn't unusual for her to get home around 9 or even later, kicking her heels off and collapsing on the couch with dramatic flair. Long night, she'd say. Donor politics. I'd hand her a glass of wine, she'd change into one of my old t-shirts, and we'd watch something until we both fell asleep. But that rhythm had changed. Now, she didn't collapse onto the couch. She'd go straight to the shower. Her clothes smelled different, spiced cologne, faint and unfamiliar, clinging to the fabric in a way soap and shampoo never could. Not the kind of scent from hugging a coworker goodbye. This was closer. Lingering. An asterisk, mate. I brought it up once, lightly. I asked if she was around new colleagues or if they'd switched cleaning products in the office. She smiled like I was overthinking it. Probably one of the new interns. He wears way too much of that department store body spray. I don't even notice it anymore. But I noticed. I started noticing everything. Her phone, for example. It used to live on the nightstand or the kitchen counter. Now it stayed glued to her side. Always on silent. Always face down. She used to leave it behind when we went on walks or ran errands. These days, she clutched it like a lifeline. Even when she slept, it was under her pillow or on the charger facing the wall. If it buzzed, she'd shift quickly, snatching it up before I could glance at the screen. And when it buzzed in the early morning, say, 2:14 a.m., she'd quietly leave the room. I once caught her sitting cross-legged on the couch, still in pajamas, phone glowing in her hands. When she saw me standing there, half awake and blinking, she smiled like she'd just remembered a funny meme. Couldn't sleep, she whispered. Didn't want to wake you. Harmless. Normal. Sweet, even if it hadn't started becoming a pattern. She also stopped asking me about my day. That was a slow fade. A few weeks ago, we'd sit on the patio after dinner and she'd lean her head on my shoulder while I talked about students or faculty drama or whatever academic nonsense had made my inbox explode. She used to nod along, ask questions, roll her eyes at the usual university politics. Now she just didn't. She'd scroll through her phone during dinner, saying things like, "Sorry, I'm just checking on a grant proposal," or "Brooke's having another crisis." I stopped trying after a while. I'd start telling her about something and watch her eyes glaze over before the sentence even finished. It felt like talking to a version of her. Like someone wearing her skin but not fully present. One afternoon, I found a train ticket in her gym bag. It had fallen out when I moved it off the dining chair. It was from Savannah. Dated 2 days earlier. I stared at it for a long time. She had told me she'd been at the city library all day working on donor profiles. Said she needed a quiet place to focus. Even showed me a picture of a desk with her laptop, a notebook, and some coffee. I remember thinking it looked staged. Too perfect. No clutter, no background noise. Almost like a stock image. Savannah wasn't that far, but it wasn't close enough to confuse with downtown Charleston. It was a deliberate trip. A decision. A plan. I didn't confront her. Not yet. I didn't want to play the paranoid husband. I'd always believed in being the calm one. The listener. The steady hand when things felt shaky. But that day, I realized being steady wasn't the same as being blind. I decided to observe instead. I started keeping mental notes, times, excuses, patterns. Her so-called women's seminars with Brooke started happening more often. Always last minute. Always out of town. Brooke was always the cover story, conveniently unavailable to confirm details. She claimed they were going to a yoga retreat or attending a lecture on empowerment through grief processing or something equally vague. The thing is, I liked Brooke. At least, I used to. But she had a way of always turning things into a subtle attack on me. Comments like, "Don't let Trevor gaslight you into thinking you need to apologize," or "Sometimes you have to choose freedom over politeness." At first, I brushed it off as quirky sister talk. Now, I wasn't so sure. I started locking the front gate camera. Not the doorbell camera, that one was too obvious and she'd grown careful. But the side yard gate had a small security cam I installed last year when someone stole a package. I'd stopped checking it regularly. Until now. It was petty maybe. Paranoid. But something in my gut told me I had to stop pretending. I couldn't keep rationalizing what I already suspected. The night before her next seminar, she packed a small overnight bag and said she and Brooke were going to a lakeside Airbnb. Just some time away to reset. No boys, no noise, no phones, she said. Her voice was cheerful, but her smile didn't quite reach her eyes. We might even burn our old journals. Let go of some stuff. I kissed her on the forehead. Told her to take her time. Watched her car pull out of the driveway and waited an hour before checking the camera feed. Nothing unusual yet. Just a normal Thursday. Normal shadows, normal wind brushing the trees. But I left the camera running. I needed to know, even if it confirmed something I'd never be able to unsee. That night, I lay in bed, alone. Listening to the silence. Staring at the empty half of the bed, wondering when it had started to feel unfamiliar. I thought back to her wedding. To the vows she whispered, shaking, eyes glassy with tears. I remembered the way she used to laugh in the mornings, nose crinkled, voice raspy from sleep as I made awful coffee and even worse jokes. I thought about the green sundress. About the man in the photo. And I waited. I waited because I knew the moment was coming. The moment where observations stopped being theory. The moment where my role changed, no longer a husband but a witness to the unraveling. I was no longer confused. I was preparing. And that kind of knowing, quiet, still, deliberate, is a storm all its own. The moment it happened, when the suspicion cracked into truth, I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I didn't even move. I just sat there, staring at my laptop screen in a dark room, watching the feed unfold like a slow-burning betrayal staged in my own backyard. It was a Saturday. 2 weeks after that last seminar excuse. Allison had left that morning wearing jeans and a tank top, her overnight bag slung over her shoulder like it weighed nothing. She kissed me goodbye like she always did, soft, deliberate, like we were still okay. Said she might not have cell reception where they were going. We'll probably do a phone detox anyway. You know, really unplug. I nodded, said I loved her, and closed the door behind her. Then I waited. Around 6:45 p.m., I logged into the backyard camera system again, same one mounted near the old maple tree, facing the side gate. The live feed loaded slowly. For a while, nothing happened. Just shadows stretching long across the grass and the neighbor's dog barking in the distance. The breeze tugged at the wind chimes on our porch. Normal life, playing dumb. Then at 8:12, the gate opened. Allison stepped through first. She wasn't alone. The man from the beach photo was behind her, same tall frame, same beard, same quiet confidence in the way he walked. He carried her bag like he'd done it before. Like he'd done it more than once. She turned to him and smiled. Not the tight, performance smile she gave me when I asked hard questions. This one was soft, relaxed. Familiar. Her hand brushed his chest. He leaned down and kissed her just once, quickly, but it didn't look new. It looked practiced. I watched them disappear behind the edge of the frame toward the back door. My heart didn't race. My hands didn't shake. If anything, I felt unnaturally calm, like my mind had already accepted it long before my eyes caught up. They were in the house for hours. I didn't need to see what happened inside. I knew. There was a rhythm to betrayal. You learn to recognize the beats even before they hit. At 1:43 a.m. she reappeared on the screen. Alone. Hair tied back. Wearing one of my old t-shirts and pajama shorts. She stepped out onto the porch and lit a candle, the same one she always claimed helped her sleep better. She leaned against the railing, eyes half closed like she was enjoying the quiet. No trace of the man. No goodbye kiss at the gate. No dramatic exit. Just the quiet aftermath of a night I wasn't meant to witness. When she finally went back inside, I sat there staring at the screen long after it had gone still. My laptop dimmed, then darkened, but I didn't close it. I just kept watching my own reflection in the black mirror, trying to figure out when exactly I'd stopped being her husband and started being her audience. That was the night I stopped giving her the benefit of the doubt. This wasn't emotional distance or miscommunication. This wasn't marriage fatigue or stress or all the other things people use to justify fractures. This was betrayal. Plain. Rehearsed. Intentional. I slept on the couch that night, though slept is a generous word for what actually happened. Mostly, I lay there listening to the creaks of the house, wondering how many nights like this I'd already missed. How many lies I'd swallowed without tasting them. By morning, I had made up my mind. I didn't yell. I didn't accuse her the second she walked into the kitchen. I didn't ask who he was or how long it had been going on. I didn't need to. Instead, I got dressed, packed a small bag, just enough for a few nights, and left my wedding ring on the table beside the laptop. I printed out a still frame from the footage. It showed Allison walking into the house with the man, her hand on his back like she was guiding him home. I framed it, placed it next to the ring. Then I walked out. No note, no speech, no drama. Just the two things that told the truth, the image and the absence. I checked into a hotel downtown. Something basic, clean, anonymous. I turned off my phone. Not just silent, off. That was important. I needed to break the cycle. No notifications. No texts asking where I was or why I was being dramatic. No excuses framed as apologies. The room was colder than our bedroom, but it was mine. For now. And that mattered. That first night, I stared at the ceiling for hours. My thoughts didn't spiral the way I expected. There was no montage of memories or internal replay of all the times she lied. Just quiet. Like my body had already processed the grief ahead of my heart. Like some part of me had been preparing for this even before the photo, the cologne, the silence. When I finally fell asleep, it was dreamless. The next few days blurred together. I went for long walks, ate when I remembered to, and let my phone stay off. I didn't tell anyone, not my colleagues, not my friends, not even my brother. The silence was a strange relief. For once, I didn't have to explain myself. I didn't have to rationalize her behavior or pretend I was fine. She didn't call. Not right away, at least. It wasn't until the fourth day that the hotel front desk rang my room. Said two women had asked for me by name, Allison and Brooke. I told the receptionist to send them up. I wasn't angry. I was ready. They came in like they were staging a TED Talk on emotional growth. Allison spoke first, voice soft and performative. She said she was sorry not for what happened, but for how I might have felt. She talked about growth. About how people evolve. How sometimes marriages need to break in order for people to find who they really are. Brooke backed her up like a second act in a spoken word piece. She used words like awakening and freedom. Said things like, Trevor, I know this is hard for you to process, but it's not really about betrayal. It's about truth. I listened. Didn't say a word. They weren't there to apologize. They were there to be understood. To be validated. To reframe the story so they could walk away as protagonists instead of perpetrators. I let them talk. Then I opened the hotel door, stepped aside, and said, I think we're done here. They left quietly. That night, I went back to watching the streetlights cast long shadows through the hotel blinds. I didn't cry. I didn't drink. I didn't fall apart, because the falling apart had already happened. I just hadn't been in the room when it did. There's a kind of grief that doesn't scream. It doesn't break furniture or play sad songs at full volume. It doesn't text friends at midnight or post cryptic quotes on social media. It just retreats. Quietly. Completely. Like a tide pulling back from the shore and refusing to return. That's what happened to me. The morning after Allison and Brooke showed up at the hotel, I woke up to the sound of nothing. No cars honking. No text alerts. No soft footfalls from the kitchen. Just silence pressing down on the walls of that two-white hotel room. I sat up in bed and realized something I hadn't felt in weeks, maybe months. I didn't want to go back. Not to the house. Not to the conversations. Not to the version of myself that tried to rationalize being unwanted. I got dressed slowly, jeans, a navy hoodie, my oldest sneakers. The kind of clothes I used to wear before life turned into polite dinners and tax brackets. I stared at myself in the mirror above the desk for longer than I'd meant to. I looked older than I remembered. Not old exactly. Just worn. Like a version of me that had stopped trying to convince anyone of anything. No more questions. No more decoding glances or tiptoeing around mood swings. Just facts. And the fact was, she chose someone else. Not in a moment of weakness. Not during a fight. Not out of loneliness. She made the decision over and over again, with intention, with strategy, and with comfort. That kind of betrayal doesn't leave room for hope. I went back to the house one final time. It was a Sunday afternoon, quiet, bright, deceptively normal. I parked down the street, walked past the neighbor's hydrangeas, and unlocked the front door like I still belonged there. Maybe legally I did. But emotionally? Spiritually? I'd been evicted long ago. The house smelled the same. Lavender and wood polish. She always lit those overpriced candles and wiped the counters even when they weren't dirty. I used to love that about her, the way she made ordinary things feel intentional. Now it felt like camouflage. Clean surfaces masking messy truths. I walked straight to the bedroom. The bed was made, but only halfway. My side, what used to be my side, was untouched. Her side had an extra pillow now. The closet door was open, a few new items hanging on her rack. Clothes I'd never seen before. Clothes that didn't ask for my opinion. I didn't take much with me. Just a few things I knew she wouldn't notice missing: a watch my dad gave me when I started teaching, a couple of books I hadn't finished, and the old hoodie she always said smelled like college. Everything else I left behind: photos, souvenirs, anniversary cards. Those belonged to a version of us that didn't exist anymore. I walked over to her nightstand and placed a small box on top. Inside was my wedding ring. I'd worn it every day for 4 years. I used to twist it when I was nervous, tap it on my coffee mug when I was thinking, take it off and spin it when I graded papers. It had a tiny nick on the underside from the time I dropped it on a sidewalk during our honeymoon. She laughed so hard I thought she might cry. Said it meant the ring had personality now. I looked at it for a long time before I closed the box. Next to it, I left the framed still from the security footage, Allison at the gate, holding the man's hand like she'd known him forever. The print was clean, no filters, no enhancements. Just the raw moment. I wanted her to see it. Not to shame her. Not to punish her. Just to make it real. To take away the abstract nature of her justifications. No more metaphors about awakening or finding herself. Just the image. Just the fact. I locked the door behind me and didn't look back. 3 days later, I was on a flight to Austin. I didn't tell anyone I was going. Not my coworkers. Not my mother. Not even Brooke, who had sent a single text that read, "I hope you're able to process this with grace. Remember, healing isn't linear." I didn't respond. Grace had left the building. Austin wasn't home, but it was away. That was enough. I'd gone there for a conference once and remembered liking the coffee shops and bookstores. It was warm. Unfamiliar. Unattached. That made it the perfect place to disappear for a while. I found a short-term rental on the east side, nothing fancy. A one-bedroom with cracked tile and humming pipes. But it had light. And silence. And a coffee maker that didn't remind me of anyone. The first week, I didn't do much. Walked. Wrote things down in a notebook without reading them back. Watched strangers live their lives and felt both envious and detached. I wasn't sad. Not in the traditional sense. I didn't cry or mope or listen to sad music. I just shut down. Emotionally. Socially. Everything. I stopped checking my email. Stopped logging into my university's system. Stopped calling anyone back. It wasn't a cry for help. It wasn't even a decision, really. It was just instinct. My mind had decided, without asking, that it was safer to power down than to try and function through the wreckage. Allison started reaching out eventually. Emails at first. Then voicemails. Then longer messages. They weren't apologetic. They were explanatory. Like she was submitting a report. She talked about her inner conflict. About how she didn't expect things to happen the way they did. About how she needed space to understand who she was outside of us. One message read, "This was never about not loving you. It was about needing to love myself too." I read that line 5 times and felt nothing. She didn't love me. Not the way she used to. Not the way you're supposed to. Because when you love someone, you don't build an entire side life and hide it behind digital silence. You don't kiss someone else and then kiss your husband like it's a ritual you forgot the meaning of. Love doesn't require perfection. But it does require respect. And she had none left for me. I changed my number 2 weeks after landing in Austin. Canceled my email. Deleted old backups. Tossed out the last physical thing that tied me to Charleston, a Polaroid from that first Asheville trip. I stared at it for a long time before ripping it in half. It wasn't rage. It wasn't revenge. It was just release. The version of us in that photo, messy-haired, laughing, unaware of everything that would come, was gone. And I wasn't going to keep pretending he still existed. I didn't expect her to find me in Austin. That might sound naive considering how many digital footprints we all leave behind. But I'd been careful. No social media. No contact with mutual friends. Even my bank statements showed nothing but grocery stores, gas, and rent. I thought I'd slipped under the surface quietly enough that I wouldn't make ripples. I was wrong. It was early March, a gray Tuesday morning, the kind that hangs in the air like an unfinished sentence. I just walked out of a coffee shop near East 6th, sipping something too strong and too bitter, when I saw her. Allison. Standing across the street in a navy coat, too light for the weather, holding her phone like it might tell her what to do next. Her eyes scanned the sidewalk until they landed on me, and when they did, I could see it, relief mixed with guilt, like someone who found a door they weren't sure they had the right to knock on. For a split second, I thought about turning around and walking away. Not out of cruelty. Just clarity. But I didn't. She crossed the street with careful steps, like she wasn't sure how to approach me anymore. I didn't speak first. I didn't move. I just watched her get closer, her breath visible in the cold air. "Trevor," she said, like a question she didn't want the answer to. "Allison," I said flatly. "Not cold. Just factual." She exhaled slowly. "You're really here? You already knew that, or you wouldn't be standing in front of me." A pause. She tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. "A habit. One I used to find endearing." "Can we talk?" she asked. I looked past her for a moment at the rusted bike rack, the couple arguing over a parking meter, the life happening all around us that didn't care about our broken pieces. "Sure," I said, gesturing toward a quiet bench down the block. "Let's talk." We sat in silence for almost a minute. She didn't look at me right away. Instead, she stared at her hands like they might say something more coherent than her mouth could manage. Finally, she broke the silence. "I didn't come here to fight." "Good," I said. "Because I'm done with that." She nodded as if that didn't surprise her. I needed to say some things. In person. You deserve that." I didn't answer. "Not yet." She took a deep breath and dove in. "I'm not going to ask you to forgive me. I know what I did. I know how it must have felt to watch that footage. I can't even imagine." "I didn't have to imagine," I said. "I saw it." She flinched but didn't argue. That was new. A few months ago, she would have tried to explain it away. She would have blamed the context or her loneliness or how I'd drifted. But now she just nodded like someone finally cornered by the truth. "Trevor," she said quietly, "I know I hurt you. And I don't expect this to fix anything. But I want you to know I didn't plan it. Not in some calculated way. It started, slowly. Conversations. Glances. I thought it was harmless. I kept thinking it would stop before it went too far. But it didn't," I said. "No," she whispered. "It didn't." A silence settled between us again. But this time it didn't feel heavy. Just empty. Like we were standing in the burned-out shell of something that used to be beautiful. "Allison," I said, keeping my voice steady, "you didn't come here to apologize. You came here to make yourself feel better." She looked up, startled. "That's not true." "It is," I said. "You want to believe that by telling me you feel guilty, by showing up here, you're doing something noble. Like this is closure. But you're not here for me. You're here because you can't stand the idea that you're the villain in someone's story." "That's not fair," she said, but her voice was weak. "Maybe not," I said. "But it's true." She stared at her hands again, and I could see the tears threatening behind her eyes. But I didn't reach for her. I didn't offer comfort. That part of me was gone. "Brooke thought I shouldn't come," she said. "She said it would reopen things. Make it worse." "She was right," I said. "But you came anyway." "I needed to see you," she said, "to explain that I wasn't trying to replace you. I didn't leave you for someone else." "You just left me," I said calmly. "Bit by bit. Lie by lie." She looked devastated, but I couldn't feel sorry for her anymore. That part of me, the one who would have wrapped his arms around her and said, "It's okay, we'll get through this." He died the night I watched her walk into our house with another man. I stood up. "I don't hate you," I said. "But I also don't owe you anything. You burned the bridge. You don't get to cross back over it now." Her eyes filled, and for a moment I thought she might argue. But she didn't. "I'm sorry," she said. "I don't know what else to say." "You already said everything when you stopped choosing me," I replied. She nodded, defeated. I walked away. She didn't follow. And that was the moment I realized how far we drifted, how final it really was. Because the woman who once fought for us now sat silently on a bench, watching me disappear without calling my name. Back at the apartment, I stared out the window for a long time. The skyline of a city I didn't belong to reflected off the glass, and I realized I didn't feel grief anymore. Not even sadness. Just stillness. Allison had said her piece. But nothing had changed. Not really. The damage wasn't something that could be reversed by a plane ticket or a tearful conversation. What we had wasn't stolen in a single moment, it had been dismantled quietly over time. By choices. By distance. By silence. I didn't reply to the text she sent the next morning. I know you need space. I just hope you believe that I loved you. Maybe still do. Maybe always will. I don't know what that means now. I just needed you to hear it. I deleted it. Not out of spite. Just necessity. Because love isn't enough, not without loyalty. Not without presence. Not without truth. And what we had wasn't love in the end. It was a memory dressed in denial. I thought Allison's visit would stir something in me. Anger. Regret. Nostalgia. But all I felt was distance, like watching a movie I used to love and now barely remembered the plot. She had crossed a line, not just with her body but with her mind, with her loyalty. Her betrayal wasn't a reckless mistake. It was a decision. Made slowly, deliberately, with help. And Brooke? She hadn't just enabled it. She coached it. Framed it as empowerment, dressed it in self-help buzzwords. What they did wasn't growth. It was demolition masked as liberation.